Welcome to Field Trials, a future farming webcast exploring innovations, issues, and perspectives in new farm technology. This is Matt, your Canadian farm kid and journalist host. Thanks for tuning in. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions and carbon markets are hot topics to say the least. With plenty of concerns and even more questions, though, getting into the carbon game is itself a complex subject. We're chatting with Robin Saluoks, CEO and founder of eAgronom, an Estonian-based company working in the carbon market space. We chat about the ins and outs of carbon markets, including farmer concerns, price per ton barriers, and plenty of other subjects. All right, Robin. Well, thanks for having this chat. Carbon markets, pardon the pun, especially given all the weather that's happening right now, but hot topic indeed. And I guess let's just start with some challenges. Some of the getting into the carbon market is not necessarily simple, but conceptually, at least from the reading I've been doing, it doesn't seem like conceptually it seems easy, right? All you're trying to do is sequester carbon with different farm practices. Sounds simple enough, right? What's the challenge of breaking into that from your perspective and from your experience?
Oh yeah, well, in general, I guess for people maybe who are not from farming, farming also sounds simple. You just put the seed to the soil and then wait for a few months and then start harvesting. But I'm also coming from the farming family, and I know it's a tough job, and especially taking care of the soil. And in carbon farming, few things come around. So first of all, soil is super complex. So knowing which practices are improving the soil and how much they're improving and implementing this all into commercial farming, that's already difficult on its own. Even if it wouldn't take the carbon farming or the carbon credit income into account. So already taking care of soil is challenging thing, and you basically work in synergy with the nature. But then if you add the voluntary carbon market layer also on top of it, then all new sets of rules come. So basically you have
which would vary depending on where you are and what company you're working with and all those layers
exactly
too. Yeah.
Exactly, but some principles are quite same. So you have to set your baseline, and then you have to know which activities are considered additional in the region and which are not. So some practices might be common practice already, and etc. So you have to do soil sampling, how exactly you have to do them, which fields, and so on. So basically, it's like it's like a tractor. There are so many small parts to make it work all together. And our job with eAgronom is to make it as simple as possible for farmers. So basically that they could focus on what they do best, and that they could they could focus on choosing what are the best practices for their farm. But I guess challenge, well, especially in carbon, in soil organic carbon related carbon credits, one of the biggest challenges is permanence, because from one hand, credit buyers would like to see that this carbon will be sequestered in the soil for 100 years or even more. So 30 years is minimum, something that the certifiers are looking, but basically they are looking for permanent carbon sequestration. So at the same time, for farmers, well, many of the farmers have rental land, so it's difficult for them to commit to certain practice changes.
That's a big issue or factor, I should say, particularly in
that's
other
a really
parts of
big
Canada.
Yeah, that's really big issue. And then even if you have your own land, like to commit to certain practices or to commit to anything on the land for even for 5 or 10 year period, that's very difficult. So this is where we see the biggest challenges, and we try to basically take this risk to ourselves, kind of. So we don't ask farmers to long-term commitments, like if there will be reasons that they have to stop some practices or the land goes away, that's fine. And we have basically taken this into account in our like a cost structure as well. So we try to take this risk also to ourselves, because we believe that in the long run, farmers will take care of the soil. So that won't be the problem. Just taking this commitment today that you will be doing some certain practice for the next 30 years, this is difficult.
Well, and so that you're hitting on something I was going to follow up with anyway, which is as a grower with facing the prospect of making a little extra cash by incorporating more cover crops or what have you. I mean, that's all well and good, but there is this underlying fear, and I see this. I've seen this brought up in a lot of different places. I just read an article from, I think, Columbia State University before talking to you how significant of an issue this is, and the very real fear of, well, maybe we have a wet harvest, for example. Now we work really heavy clay soil. We have a wet harvest. Sometimes you just got to get in and you got to take your crop off, and your field's rutted, and then that means you have to go in the next spring or when things dry out, and you have to till it. Maybe you're not full mobile plowing, but you still have to, substantial tillage. And then am I faced with do I have to, like, I have a consequence? Do I have a payment? I have to, so it's not just making money all the time. I need to be aware of whether or not I'm vulnerable to having a negative in the carbon market as well. And so if I'm understanding you right, what you're saying is what you're trying to do is develop a system where something like that, like a grower, and you're in southern Estonia, you said, yes?
Yeah, well, I'm right now in Estonia, in European Union, but we have carbon projects in all around Europe.
Okay.
And also now setting up some pilots in Africa, in Kenya, Tanzania,
cool.
Zambia, Zimbabwe. So in Europe we have around 1 million hectares, so 2.4 million acres under the managed by our customers basically. But and in Africa just getting started. But yeah, that's the common fear from the farmers. It's understandable. It's a new thing. There are a lot of myths around there, and in a way, this actually is not even that big of a problem in reality. If there is 1 year of bad weather, or let's say 2 years of bad weather or something, but that is really common fare. Because in that case, it's totally fine if farmers cannot do some practice for 1 year or 2 years and then continue after this. They can still continue creating credits, and that's also we are doing prepayments for farmers, but up to half of their sellable credits. So that means that it's in the long run anyways, they don't have to pay us anything back. So if they continue those practices, it's more difficult case when they want to stop entirely and leave the project. So then if you have done some prepayments and they cannot deliver the credits, then obviously they have to pay the money back. But in that case, when farmers have a lot of rental land, and they are just fine with not getting prepayments, but they just get credits after they are issued after working with us for some time. And one maybe important thing to notice also, maybe common misunderstanding, at least in Europe, is that at first some farmers thought that this is going to be like a second yield in a year for them, that kind of income. And unfortunately today that's not the case, but it's more like a health insurance for your soil. So it helps to cover these costs that go into improving your soil quality and soil organic carbon levels, and then the financial benefits actually come from the from having better soil. And there actually won't be much of the profit from the carbon program itself, like cash flow. Your cost for, let's say, doing cover cropping or implementing some new practice will be quite similar as the income from the carbon.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily just a wad of cash in the mail, right? It's so maybe we can talk about price for a second, because there's something else I ran into is I don't know if it was I think it was the World Bank I was reading. I've got a couple of stats over here. That's why I keep looking off to the side. Discussing that the price per ton is generally speaking not at a level where it provides enough incentive to make these changes. Like I think I've heard numbers in Canada and the United States anywhere from 15 to like $30 a ton or something like that.
Mhm.
And like where is the pricing at, generally speaking, and like is it, in your experience, does it seem like it's enough? Because from the reading I was doing, admittedly a couple of the articles were a couple years old, so it could be out of date by now, but it seems like the pricing isn't there. Is that a key component of this? Like, does that have to change a lot, or based on like what you're trying to do, are you trying to make it work even with a price that maybe isn't necessarily considered ideal?
Yeah, well, I think current price, so maybe we have pushed this as well a bit. So basically, but and ahead of the time, but we are paying 30 euros per ton for farmers to farmers, and the ton of sequestered carbon, and this seems like a bare minimum. So this is what makes, so over there the unit economics, and as I said, it's like a soil insurance. It will cover the cost. So and you will get better soils, but you won't get like a second yield income, and that's okay. And it still makes for farmers to make sense for them to join today. Maybe today the cost will or the income will cover the costs, but they get better soils, and later they can continue producing those credits year after year after year. And then when the price goes higher, there might be some profit as well. But yeah, if the price would be lower than this, then it would be quite difficult to, well, it would be more difficult to get farmers on board, certainly in that case.
Like most things, it's easier to get adoption when there is a little bit of immediate benefit as well as the long term, right? Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you got something out of the conversation. As ever, the idea is to explore topics, items, and perspectives in the ag tech space. So if you're interested in sharing your own perspective and joining us for a conversation, feel free to get in touch with the Future Farming team at futurefarming.com. You can also reach me directly at FurRural on Twitter. That's at FERRURAL on Twitter, or via ruralphilosopher.com. Thanks again for listening.